Takže ešte raz by som rád všetkých privítal na dnešnom webinári venovaný potravinárskych produktov do USA. Ja len by som krátke povedal tú štruktúru. Samozrejme, že hlavnou témou je preberať náš konzultant z USA. Si ho predstaví kolegyňa Monika do veľvyslanectva v Washingtone. A chcel som len povedať na začiatok, že v rámci tých časových obmedzení, ktoré máme počas webinára, tak pokrieme samozrejme čo najviac otázok, tie, ktoré boli zadané dopredu, ale tiež by som vás rád upozornil, že v spodnej časti obrazovky, či už sa pripájate cez telefón alebo počítač, je funkcia tzv. Q&A, kde môžete písomne zadávať svoje otázky a obracať sa na nášho konzultanta. Budeme snažiť ich odpovedávať live podľa možností. To je v podstate z mojej strany na úvod všetko a teraz by sme prešli do anglického jazyka a ja by som poprosil našu ekonomiku, aby predstavila dnešného pána.
So good afternoon to our Slovak companies and participants, and good morning to our today's speaker, Michael Sass. I will very briefly introduce Michael before he gives his remarks and his presentation. My name is Monika Sobkovičová, and I'm an economic counselor at the Slovak Embassy in Washington, D.C. So Michael Sass has been active in the food industry since 1996. He's also one of our fellow Europeans, as he was born in Belgium. He's an accredited consultant for various European trade agencies. As in his capacity as the president and founder of Across Foods, he's been offering a wide range of management consulting services for the food industry since 2006. More recently, he's been also involved and working with the working group at the Specialty Food Association, and he's been dealing with education and preparedness of international food companies targeting the US market. So Michael, thank you very much again for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Okay, good morning. Thank you, Monica, for your introduction. And good afternoon to everybody in Europe. It's my pleasure to be with you today. Just for your information, I'm located on the East Coast. I am about 1 hour north from Philadelphia and 1.5 hours southwest from New York. So right in between those two large big cities. And so I've been in the US since early 2003. And since then, I've been helping mainly European companies to get an understanding of the US food market and help them launch new products and support their activities in doing so. All right, I will share my screen at this moment. Let's see how that works. I will take my presentation here. Okay, I believe I should be. Can you see this?
Yeah, it's on. We can see you.
Okay, good. So this is my information. This is today's event. And I was thinking together with Monica and Andre what topics we were going to discuss. I've selected a few out of a wide assortment of topics that we could address. I can speak days and days on the subject, but I think for most of the companies, when I look at the participant list, the following topics could make most sense. So I'll try and talk a little bit about the market sales approach. And if you're already in the market, what your potential expansion strategies could be. Another topic is supply chain and distribution. And this is actually, I would say, the most underrated topic when exporting food from Europe into the US market. People tend to forget that there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of things to be taken care of. Role of a US customs broker. This is a question that keeps coming back when I deal with European companies. They're not so sure what the role is of the customs broker, what to expect, how they can help each other. And so it's always a good subject to elaborate a little bit on that. Last but not least, the Food Safety Modernization Act with the Foreign Supplier Verification Program has had a major impact in our industry since 2017, has changed the landscape dramatically. So it speaks for itself that we need to spend some time on this subject so that you are aware of this and understand what the consequences are. Okay, first topic up, market sales approach, expansion strategy. Basically, when you have an interest of launching or looking at the US market and launching your food products, you have to realize that what is the road to market? How can I get into this market? There are a few US companies that have sales agencies in Europe, like a TJ Maxx, another name for the same company. You have Williams-Sonoma. So these are all retailers that have purchasing offices in Europe. And so they take care of all the formalities. So that's usually a very easy way, a very quick way of launching your products on the US market. But this is not a long-term strategy. This is just an opportunistic sales where you can see on the short term if potentially there is good feedback on your products and you can try to develop your own path. Secondly, you can start prospecting importers. Importers are companies who are going to take possession of your goods. They will buy your products. They will hopefully pay you on time. And so they are the importer of record and the owner of your product. Seems easy, it is easy, but there are a few disadvantages to this approach. In this way that since the importer has purchased your goods and paid for your goods, most likely they are not so open towards sharing information with you because they own the products. They feel like they're not going to share the contacts of the buyers that they're working with. They're not going to share the sales network, the broker network that they may be working with. They're going to give you little feedback on what the presentations with the buyers will tell them. So it's rather a closed way of doing business, if I may say so, as the opposite to transparent. As well, you have to imagine an importer on average is going to take somewhere between 35 and 40% margin. So if you add it up to the whole cost price analysis, it may very well be that you are pricing yourself out of the market because of this road to market through an importer. Importers are trying to protect themselves as well more and more. So for them, what we see the last couple of years is that these importers develop their own private labels, their own brand names, rather than taking on the brands of the exporters, the producers outside of the US. That's as well a trend that we see. Another opportunity, another way to go to market is through an agent. An agent is basically a person who represents you, who is an extension of your export department. You are paying the agent commissions on the sales. And so the disadvantage is there that you are not receiving your money right away. You may be having to ship smaller quantities. You may have to look at opening up a local inventory. But on the other hand, it's much more feasible from a price perspective, from a cost price perspective, to enter your products into the market. There is transparent communication. Agents will with you share who they're talking to, what they're talking about, what the next steps are, because they want to keep you involved, because they need your support as well. So be aware that when you work with an agent, don't think that the agent is able to do all the work and all the job. No, they will need time from you to develop together projects, private labels, new business opportunities in this way. Another road to market is to set up, to incorporate your own US subsidiary. In the US, it is very easy and much more easy than in Europe to incorporate your own US entity. It will give you a lot of advantages, which we will discuss as well during the section of the Foreign Supplier Verification Program. I believe as well we have one of the attendance participants today with us who already went through that road to market, who has their US subsidiary in the US here today. And after my presentation, we will have the opportunity to listen to the story of this company and how they have been able to be successful. US subsidiary is going to give you some advantages. First, which is very important, is it is going to give the US audience, your buyers, your distributors that you will be working with, the idea that you are here to stay on the long term. Because you set up your company, you show that you have a long-term strategic vision of being present on the US market. So that's a good thing. Buyers in the US want to have somebody available here who they can call, who they can pick up the phone and ask questions in case they need to. They're usually very reluctant picking up the phone and dialing an international number because they don't know if the person on the other line is going to be able to respond in English or not. So that makes them hesitant, and that's of a negative impact, of course, on your potential business development activities. As well, with the US subsidiary, it gives you the advantage that you can purchase the product liability, which is mandatory over here for doing business. Product liability insurance will protect you, will protect the producer in case there is a claim. Let's say you bring granola out in the market, and in the granola there's a stone or something like that, and somebody breaks his tooth, then these people most likely will come after you to ask for reimbursement for the cost that they incurred. So product liability is protecting you. When you have to acquire product liability from your European facility, your European production plant, from my experience, it is costing you anywhere between 5,000 and 8,000 euros per year in order to acquire such product liability insurance. In case you have a US entity, you are able to acquire product liability through your subsidiary, and you are set for in between $1,500 to $2,000 per year. Of course, depending on the revenue that you generate on an annual basis, but for a startup company, it's usually somewhere around that level, $1,500 to $2,000, so much more economic. Another element we have to take into consideration in this whole setup is that most of our retail customers will pay you by check, still a piece of paper. So it's something in Europe that we said goodbye to many years ago, but in the US it still exists. And so be aware that you will be receiving a lot of payments via check. So if you have your US subsidiary, you can open up a US bank account, and so you can deposit your checks there. People sending checks to Europe in US dollars, it's going to be complicated. Most likely it's not going to happen. And when you receive the check, you will have more cost on the check to deposit it than the actual value of the check. So there is well one of the advantages of setting up your US subsidiary. Okay, lately we see as an additional road to market and an increased way of doing business, especially during COVID, is through e-commerce. It's another road to market. We all know about Amazon, big, powerful machine, different ways of doing business with them. So that's as well an option for you to perhaps get your feet wet. Try to sell through e-commerce first to see what the response is from the public before you enter into a full strategic long-term launch. That's another way. Maybe just for your information here to get an understanding with COVID, what we've been through the past year, 30% of food distribution in the US is still up for grabs. We all know that the food service part of business with the restaurants closing down, they lost a tremendous volume of business. Retailers, shelf life products gained in business. The revenue was higher than anticipating last year. fresh products or launching new products into supermarkets was completely impossible almost. So today we see that there is still about 30% of food distribution that is going to go one way or the other. Is it going to go back to food service? Food service developed their takeout business more importantly or more substantially. E-commerce has gained part of the distribution of food. Retailers lost in some cases, gained in some other cases. So important to know that the industry is not completely settled yet. We still face consequences of COVID at this moment, but it's, I think, an interesting point of view to understand that there's still 30% up for grabs. Okay, once you're in the market, once you have decided which road to go, importer, agent, US subsidiary, or maybe a combination between an agent and a US subsidiary, that's as well a possibility. You can decide how to deal with your potential customer base. US is a very large market, so therefore there are a lot of brokers in place. Brokers are independent sales agents, but these are more related to either a specific retail account or specific food service account. They can be geographically allocated, so they can be a broker for retail grocery stores in the North Pacific, meaning in Washington State and Idaho and up there. Or they can be specifically for the drugstore trade of channels. So brokers, you have them in all shapes and sizes, and so it's a very common way of doing business here. You may as well, for instance, enter into discussions with a buyer from a retailer or from food service distributor. And so at the end of the discussion, they will let you know, well, it's good, we have all information, but now you need to include my broker who will take 3% or 5% of commission payments in order to make this deal happen. So be aware that you have to ask questions when you're sitting in front of buyers and make sure that you fully understand which parties are involved and what their cost would be. FTE Salesforce, full-time equivalent Salesforce, is of course as well a way of increasing your sales capacities. Usually one does not start that way in the US market. When you're a European company, you don't want to work with an importer. You decided either to work with an agent or set up your US subsidiary. You may send over one of your own employees dealing with everything from sales to general management to supply chain, or you can have your US subsidiary be managed by an agent or a service agency like Across Foods, like my company. I mentioned retail, I mentioned food service, I mentioned e-commerce, I mentioned industrial. These are, well, industrial I hadn't mentioned yet. That's more towards the food making companies over here. So that's more related to when you are dealing with ingredients. These are at the same time as well different opportunities for you when you are discussing about your expansion strategy. If you have a retail product, does it make sense to go into food service? Most likely you will require a different type of packaging. It is as well the food service, but food service is a completely different market than retail, different structures, different ways of doing business. So be aware of that, but it's a large opportunity. I know as well that there are quite a few beverage companies attending today at this webinar. I have to admit my specialty is food. I do deal as well, or I have dealt as well in the past with some beverage companies. There as well, it's a completely different market. Not as to the structure, but as the ways of doing business. My experience is mainly that for the beverage industry, there's a lot more, many more funds, marketing funds that you need to make available in order to do promotions, in order to enter into the market. Beverage market is dominated by a few huge companies. I'm mentioning like the Coca-Colas of the world and the Red Bulls of the world and whatever. So basically that space is already very saturated, and you are fighting with many other beverage producers in the market for just a small percentage of that beverage market that is available here on the US market. But I'm sure that our colleague here later on in the presentation will clarify that a little bit more. Branded is one way of going into the markets. You have your own brand. Bear in mind that that is going to cost you a lot of money, because if you want to launch a brand, you need to support your brand. That means that you need to do advertising. That means that you have to support your distributors and your retail partners trying to promote your brand. So don't forget private label. It takes a little bit longer to develop, but once you get through that initial cycle, that product life cycle, you may have some more stable business later on. Of course, you're prone, in case you are dealing with a retailer like an Aldi or a Lidl, where if your next competitor will be 5 cents cheaper the next year, that you lose the business again. But don't be discouraged, because there are a lot more private label opportunities out there, which give you a stable business on the long term. Try to think as well outside of the box. Don't always think in terms of your branded products, your packaging that you're used to. Look as well at bulk opportunities. Sometimes it is easier to enter the market if you sell your product in bulk and you have it repackaged by somebody here on the local market. It's going to save you on supply chain costs, on ocean freight. It is going to save you money on developing packaging. And you have most likely a partner that is already having many entries into many different distribution channels that would help you generate sales much quicker than if you were to do it with your branded product. So try to think outside the box there. Trade channel selection. So we have a few more trade channels here, I think, than we usually have in Europe. We have our mass markets like a Target. We have Walmart, which is a specific category by themselves. We have the club stores such as Costco and BJ's and Sam's. I see that a lot of European companies are trying to focus on these club stores because the volume is, of course, very large, but bear in mind that at the same time, you may be undermining your other business development activities. If you enter the market first through a club store, high volume, a very low price, it may make it difficult for you to convince other retailers later on why they still would be interested in taking on your product, because it's already out there at a very cheap price level. So you may be undermining your own objectives. Of course, a trade channel that is growing and has been growing over the last years is the section of the natural grocery retailers. Whatever is natural, whatever is organic, we see a large section of the market that is interested in that. Consumers are increasing. It's a place where everybody wants to be, because it's basically leading the other retailers into deciding what the next big thing will be. So very important one. I see one of our participants is in the organic baby food. Certainly worth further investigating and seeing what opportunities you may have over here. We do have a different trade channel here where a lot of food items are sold, which is the drug trade channel, like CVS and Walgreens. Is usually something that we don't see in Europe, but here as well we see a lot of confections. We even see some fresh items in there, fresh, especially for the drink sector. That's as well a big opportunity there. One thing which is specific that I would like to mention here with the drug trade channel is that they ask for a guaranteed sell-through. If you hear that, it's something that you need to understand what that means. For instance, if you're launching a new item, they will ask you if you are guaranteeing your sales. They could ask you, for instance, do you guarantee that 80% of your product will be sold through within the first, I'm saying 2 weeks, could be 3 weeks, could be 4 weeks. if you are thinking of launching your new product there. So whatever you did not sell through, if they bought 100 and you're selling through only 75 within that period of time, then they are expecting you to discount the remainder 25 out of the 100 in order to facilitate the sale, and for them in order to have the turnover that they're looking for and the revenue that they had in mind when giving you an opportunity. Bear in mind as well that with all of these retail opportunities, these food service opportunities, even with e-commerce, certain ways of doing business with Amazon, if you are trying to enter into the market space, usually that means that somebody else has to leave. So once again there, when you sit in front of your buyer, your partner, your distribution partner, dare to ask questions, dare to look at a not so positive outcome, dare to ask them, what do you expect from me when you discontinue my line? What is it going to cost me? Do I need to foresee a certain percentage of my cost price related to just an exit strategy? Dare to ask questions. That is the majority of the trade channels, I would think. And then, of course, if you're into expansion strategies, mergers and acquisitions take very often place here. Bigger companies take over smaller companies, merge them to be stronger together. So, okay. I believe that is that, Anders, unless we have some questions specifically to this point at this moment, additional questions? If not,
for the moment, Michael.
Okay, I will continue to the next topic. As I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, this is the most underrated topic when exporting to the US market. It's supply chain and distribution. People are happy that they may have a contract in place. People are happy that they may sell some product, but then you have to fulfill it. If you're into the export industry today, I'm quite sure you are aware of the turmoil that is currently happening in the ocean freight industry. Freight forwarders and steamship lines are fighting each other. There's lack of capacity, there's a lack of equipment, prices are going up. So it's really a rough time at this moment for exporting your products from Europe into North America. Anyway, what can we do? We can select air freight, depends on your product. If you have fresh products with a short shelf life, or if the value of your product is very high, you may opt for air freight. It may actually be your only way of getting your product over here. It's going to be expensive. Just make sure that you're fully aware of your cost price analysis and what that means before you start sharing prices with your potential customers in the market. If we look at ocean freight, we can go for FCL, stands for full container load, or there are in Europe certain organizations that deal with LCL, less than container load. You have these as well in temperature control environments. So it may be a good option for you to start off the first year, let's say, because let's be honest, the days that you find a customer who is going to buy a full container load from you as of the beginning, those days are over. The risk is too high, the investment is too high. And so either you are going to set up a local inventory, warehousing here in the US, and ship your full container load over here and put your products in storage and ship from the warehouse, or you're going to ship most likely at the beginning either LCL or air freight. So be aware of that. Full container load. Of course, if you were working with certain drinks, maybe that's a different scenario, but I'm not sure. I think it's both the same for food and for beverage, that working with full container loads as of day one with your distribution partners, very unlikely to happen unless you can provide a large sum of marketing funds to promote the product into the market, which usually is not the scenario when you start off in a big market like the US. So 3PL warehousing, I think is an important one. It fits right into the scenario that we discussed before with setting up your own US entity, with working through an agent potentially, or sending over your own personnel. This moment, After COVID, restaurants are opening up, so there's a huge shortage in warehousing in the US, so prices are going up for sure, but in Europe as well, I understand. But it is the way to go if you want to develop the US market strategically, step by step. I would really recommend you to have local inventory, to look for your perfect warehouse. Make sure that you have access to an online portal where you can look at your inventory, where you can see the movements in and out, your order processing, and so on. In a more ideal situation, or depending on the product, of course, you can have it co-manufactured in the US. You share a recipe, you sell your know-how, you have it co-manufactured in the US. That's a way to overcome all of this, but those scenarios are very limited, I would say. Distribution. So once you have your products in the US in a warehouse, we have to look at not full container loads, but full truckloads and less than truckloads. So there are a lot of players in the market. People from Europe always are surprised about the cost, the difference in cost between shipping a pallet here in the US compared to shipping a pallet in Europe. So make sure that you have a good understanding of these cost elements before you start sharing prices into the market. As a last point there, I make a distinction between wholesalers, physical distributors, and direct sales. So a wholesaler is basically somebody who takes possession of your goods, is selling your products into the market, and so is acting basically as what we call in Europe a distributor. You can sell direct to retailers. But bear in mind, the point that I wanted to make here is that you may be selling to a CVS who has 17,000 outlets, 17,000 outlets. But it may just be that you're shipping half a pallet to one of each, to each of the, maybe they have 20 distribution centers all across the US. So it's not because you hear those large numbers, 17,000 outlets, that you automatically have to think, oh, I'm shipping full container loads. No, because they may have 20 distribution centers in the US to service those 17,000 outlets. And so it can very well be that you're shipping a pallet here, half a pallet there, 2.5 pallets over there. So once again, the need for a local warehouse seems to be a must in this scenario. A physical distributor is actually somebody, is a distributor, is a logistics partner. They're not doing any sales. They're not organizing any sales for you, but they are a logistics partner, and they are usually hired by the retailer or by your customer. For instance, to give you an example, BJ's has around, it's a club store on the East Coast. They have around 240 stores, I believe, at this moment. For their frozen products, they work with a physical distributor, which is called Burris. So if I have frozen bakery products, I would be selling to Burris. I would be delivering into 3 distribution centers, one in Orlando, one in Maryland, and one in Connecticut, to service all of these 230, 240 stores. And so my invoice will go to the physical distributor. The physical distributor will pay me. They will only move the inventory from your own inventory. So I'm renting space basically at this physical distributor to have my product stored. And then once they have to do the store deliveries, they will move the inventory from my inventory, what I'm paying for, to their inventory. So it's a very nifty system. It costs a lot of money, but it's efficient. And usually the cost that the customer is paying, the retailer is paying, which is not included in your price, is around 6 to 8% of your total cost price, just to give you an understanding there. Giving you some prices for trucking, maybe to give you an understanding per pallet. If I were to ship a pallet with refrigerated products, I know we got some dairy people here. If my warehouse would be in New Jersey and I'm shipping 1 pallet to the West Coast, my cost would be somewhere around $650, $700 for 1 pallet of product refrigerated. If I'm selling 1 product, 1 pallet of dry products like the energy drinks or whatever, from the East Coast, let's say from New Jersey going into Chicago, dry, so non-temperature controlled, the cost price would be somewhere around $350. This is just to give you an understanding of what the cost would be there. Okay, I think it's 35. I gotta hurry up a little bit. Next slide. Role of the US Customs Broker. Well, basically your US Customs Broker is a very important partner. They are your liaison between US Customs and FDA. And so they should really help you out in clearing the goods, in being your point of contact when there are questions by US Customs or by FDA, and by making sure that your import duties, your import tariffs are paid. Working with US Customs requires either a single entry bond or a continuous bond. A single entry bond means if you have less than 3 entries per year, I would advise working with a single entry bond. The bond is basically a guarantee, an insurance that you have to purchase with US Customs, that in case you're not paying your import tariffs, that the insurance company will pay for that. That's basically, in a few simple words, what a bond means. Continuous bond, as of 3 or more entries per year, you have a continuous insurance policy for 1 year. It's going to cost you around $550, $600 per year in order to contract that insurance policy. Make sure that you talk sufficiently with a few different customs brokers before you appoint one, because it's really a very important partner to you. He's going to guide you if you need import licenses. He should guide you with whatever health certificates are required when you're dealing with dairy products. They should help you with your tobacco and alcohol license in case you are importing alcohol-containing beverages. So really an important partner. Don't just select the first one that comes to the list that is being provided to you, but really start talking to these people, get a better understanding of their knowledge and of the services that they can provide you with. This is a big country. There are a lot of customs brokers. There's a lot of goods that need to enter. It's very important that you can communicate with your customs broker, that they respond promptly to your inquiries, that they respond promptly to the inquiries that would come from US Customs or FDA. So I can't say it enough. Make sure that you have a good connection before you decide whom to select to do this duty, to fulfill this duty for you. All right, moving on to the most important topic since 2017. The whole food industry has been affected by this legislation. The Food Safety Modernization Act is something that is a piece of legislation that stems back from the Obama era, but that was introduced to go into effect in 2017. In a few simple words, what does it mean? It means that the responsibility of importing goods, of importing food items, lies with the importer on the US side. Before, it used to be the exporter who was responsible, but FDA found out that they don't have sufficient control on the exporters all around the world in order to make sure that the human consumer here on the US market is prevented from any harm. That's the real objective, to protect the US consumer from any potential harm. So part of the Food Safety Modernization Act that deals with imported products is called the Foreign Supplier Verification Program. So now the responsibility lies with the importer of record. It means that you can compare this to a BRC certificate, a HACCP plan, IFS, International Food Standards Plan, or something similar. So the importer of record will need to prove, will need to show to FDA that they are in control of who they are importing from and what they are importing from this exporter. So it's a whole book. It's like exactly an ISO book or your BRC book that you have. You need to describe what type of measurements you're taking to do a hazard analysis in the same way as you do with your other programs. You need to describe specifically which products you are importing from the exporter. You need to describe specifically product per product what the hazards, potential hazards may be, what is happening in case there is a hazard, what is happening with the recall plan, stuff of that nature. You need to have a log of your imported containers, your imported items, where they're stored. So this is a high impact. It means, or it has as a consequence, that a lot of these importers from before, smaller importers, no longer want to take on that responsibility. And so they cease to exist. It means that a lot of retailers where you could sell to directly before 2017, they no longer have the personnel. They don't want to take on the responsibility, the liability that comes with this FSVP. And so here as well, one of my suggestions, one of my recommendations to set up a US entity will overcome this. You set up your US entity, you act as your own importer of record, and then you sell into the US market as a domestic, local food provider, beverage provider. So as well, again, a reason why you should set up your US entity. Another element, another consequence of this FSVP is that every company on the importing side needs a qualified individual. You can obtain the title of qualified individual by following a course. It's a 2-day course or a 3-day course, or by having the required experience. But again, a lot of retailers, a lot of smaller distributors or importers don't want to deal with that. So it creates entry barriers for a lot of companies that were doing some impulsive export activities before. It no longer exists. Through the COVID times, FDA was not really doing any audits, but now as of this year, they are increasing their audits. So it's not a question of if you are going to get an audit, it's a question of when you're going to get an audit. If you are still deciding to go through an importer, make sure to start up the conversation. Ask the question, do you have an FSVP plan? Because the last thing you want to see is that your goods are over here, but they are rejected because there is no FSVP plan supporting it and they need to be sent back. So open up the questions. If you have direct conversations with retailers, ask them who's responsible for the FSVP. Are you taking care of that, or do I have to take care of that? So lots of consequences because of this new piece of legislation, completely changing the market. But the solution, as I suggested, set up your own US entity, have it managed by somebody over here. You don't need to have a full-time person in place to do that, but there are certainly solutions to that. And so I believe I'm about to get to the end. Okay, just a few quick words about my company. I've been in business here since 2006. My company provides 4 different types of services: market intelligence and consulting, doing market research and getting back to you with a strategic recommendation. This is how I should do it, or this is, I wouldn't do it because I see a lot of red flags and I wouldn't start doing it. I do business development and sales as a US agent nationwide. I have back office activities dealing with a lot of ocean freight and local warehousing and order processing. And then last but not least, corporate governance. I provide my address. I can incorporate your US entity here and manage that from a distance, so you don't need to have full-time people over here until you're large enough to take it over to justify investing in full-time people and dealing with that. So thank you very much for your attention. I know it was a lot of information. I could go on and go on, but I believe we have one of the participants who wants to share a little bit of their story at this moment. So thank you, and we'll see you again for the Q&A.
Yes, thank you, Michael, very much for an interesting presentation. And as you said, we will give floor to one of the representatives of the companies that already entered the US market. Yeah, and he's with us already. And then we will get back to questions and answers part. Okay, so the floor is yours. I'm sorry, Mr. Bushbacher, we're having troubles actually seeing or hearing you.
Do you like me to proceed, Andre, at this moment?
Yeah, please. Sorry for disturbing you.
All right. What I was thinking to do at this moment, I know we received some questions from a couple of participants, but I as well have the list of participants. So I was thinking if I just go over the list and all the products that you have just for a couple of minutes and maybe share a few comments with you so that you have really specific information on your product line, if you don't mind. So I see, and that was one of the questions that we had about the honey liqueur. So I think with your name, Medovica, if I pronounce that correctly, I would certainly keep that original name because I think it goes back to the roots and to the heritage of the product line. But I would come up with a second name underneath that, like a honey liqueur or I don't know what, something in that name, but I would definitely suggest to keep the original name, but add something next to that in order to clarify a little bit for the non-Slovak consumers what it is actually that we're drinking. So that would be my recommendation there. Then I am looking at frozen baked products. I know you have a lot of questions. If I may be honest, your questions are very specific and very detailed, so it would lead us too far to answer to all these questions here. I am available for you after this webinar to go more into detail, but I feel you need as well a consultant, a specialist in the market to assist you with all of these questions and potentially many more that you have. One of my specialties is, by coincidence, it's frozen bakery. So it would be my pleasure to assist you further on. Let me just take one question here. What are the main administrative legal measures a U.S. agent is able to undertake on behalf of the producer? U.S. agent is basically an extension of your export market. So he is not allowed to sign on your behalf any contracts unless there is a written document that states that he can do so. So he's not allowed to contract anything on your behalf. He's just allowed to inform you what projects are being discussed, what the potential customer is asking for, and basically be the liaison, being the bridge between two different cultures, two different nations, two different sets of legislature, and try to come up with a sale at the end of the day. That's basically the job description of your agent. Promote, but do not contract, and make sure to bring back transparent information and new contracts. Okay, next one on the list. What do we have here? Healthy functional drinks. There are a few people with drinks. I see as well, there are actually two companies with healthy functional drinks. As I had mentioned, it's a big market, but it's dominated by very large corporations, and it's just a very slight percentage of the market that is still open for these hundreds and thousands of other providers that are trying to get a space in that market. What I know from the beverage industry is that there's a lot of marketing money involved. So the one who has the most funds to support their distributors and their retailers in promoting these items, that's usually the one who gets the limited shelf space that is available. So I know as well, and that's a bit the difference with the food industry. Beverage industry works with importers, works with distributors, a bit less with agents. That's my understanding. So that's a little bit the difference in the market structure. Go to trade shows once they open up again. Talk to industries, like you have the Specialty Food Association, you have the International Frozen Food Association, you have the National Confectioners Association, and there are beverage associations as well. Talk to these people, see how they can help you, see if they can connect you with some distributors. That would be my best advice there that I can give you. Herbal tea liqueurs, I think that's what we just had. Healthy foods, organic, bio, raw bars, coconut. Really interesting, really expanding category. There's a lot of products coming from all over the world. Personally, I'm dealing with a company from Italy who is active in the organic and allergen-free breakfast cereal category. I must say it's really amazing to see how interested people are, how quickly we can get results with buyers, new private label projects. It's all private label that I'm doing there for this company. So really, definitely, I would advise you to further investigate, because I'm quite sure there will be some opportunities for you. What else do I have there? I see we got a few people with dairy. The difficulty with dairy is that there are import quota. So be sure to understand what that means. It means that as of a certain moment, your product will no longer be accepted under the normal import duties, but there will be an increased rate, or there may be even a complete blockage of imports until the next calendar year starts. For cheeses, I would definitely recommend I might be counter speaking or being speaking against myself, but there are a few large importers in the dairy sector, members of the Specialty Food Association, and I see that the majority of cheeses is being handled through them, because import licenses, veterinary certificates, very important as well. When you are in the dairy industry, you're not talking about shipping full container loads. You're potentially not talking about selling full pallets per product. You're more looking at launching a few new items here and there. And these large importers, they have platforms in Europe where they would consolidate all products from Europe and then ship them as importer of record directly under their company name to the US. So that might be a good suggestion for you to contact these importers, make a presentation. Don't be afraid to ask what needs to be done from a promotional standpoint, because I see lots of these people flying over for the trade shows, and they just have like a little table at the booth, and they present and they give away their product for free. So that would be some recommendation there. Andre, if I need to stop and have our colleague come back, because I see it's 5 minutes before the hour, you just let me know, okay?
You know what? I mean, how many companies that are left on the list? You would like?
Well, I believe you said we had 14 participants, so I think I've covered most of the categories. Organic baby food I had mentioned already, definitely worthwhile exploring further. We go back to drinks, some dairy. So I think I covered all categories at this moment.
Okay, you know what? We actually, in this very moment, received one question from a producer of alcoholic and also non-alcoholic beverages. And they are asking that if they would like to enter the US market with, for instance, vodka, would you recommend to go from state to state or to build a distribution for the whole country? What would be the most easy state to enter?
Yeah, what I see in the market is indeed each state, when you want to sell alcoholic beverages, requires you to purchase an alcohol license to distribute. And so if you are going on this venture by yourself, it would be a very long-term project. And indeed, you would have to go state by state to purchase that license and then distribute your product into the market. And once you have a coverage which is sufficient, you move on to the next state. Of course, there as well, as I had mentioned, in alcoholic beverages, there are a lot of importers, there are a lot of regional distributors. So most likely that is the most advised way to go ahead rather than working with an agent. But that's my limited knowledge of the alcohol-containing beverage market that I'm sharing here with you. So be aware of that as well.
And if you could pinpoint the most easy state to enter when it comes to alcoholic beverages?
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. it depends. I mean, we're talking vodka here. You have a large vodka market. You have a large local producer in Austin in Texas. So I would not go to Texas then, because they have good coverage there. Probably focusing on a metropolitan, on a state where you have a large Slovak population, or Eastern European population, or European population, and try to focus on that first. Don't focus on New York. It's too competitive. It's too expensive. Rather think of a market like Illinois and Chicago, or somewhere in the Midwest to try that out.
Okay, thank you very much for answering this one. And I was just noticed that our colleague from the Slovak company that entered US market already, their own representation there with us. I believe he resolved technical issues, so let's give it another try.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, first of all, let me apologize really for technical issues we had at the start. That's the internet connection in our meeting room, but it's all sorted now. Just to give you a few words about Diva's brand, we've been around for 10 years now, and knowing US markets as very progressive and hungry for innovations, the idea of giving it a try on US market came across our minds quite a few times in our history. However, no action happened till 2016, I have to say. We quickly realized that entering US markets can be very different to Europe, but luckily enough for us, exhibiting regularly at international food and beverage fairs brought Divas into focus of innovation hunters from all around the world, with USA being no exception. And this is how our brand was actually discovered by one of the innovation hunters from the United States. First exploring activities on the market started unfolding pretty fast for us. Being our action team, we decided to establish our US subsidiary on the same year, really, and we started to perform market research and feasibility study for US market entry. And I have to say it took almost 3 years, and we actually learned a lot during that period. Just to give you a brief example on what actually the market intelligence connection activities cover. It was mapping the market segment, mapping the competition, innovation progress and pace at which they come to the market, checking the consumer expectations and to find out if we fit into their expectations, mapping consumer taste profile, doing some research on retailers, their expectations in terms of distribution, logistics, pricing, marketing support, doing all the cost structure really to make sure that actually your pricing model works, including the overseas shipping costs involved. FDA pre-approvals for labels, for ingredients. So it was quite an extensive process before actually we were able to say, yes, we are ready to enter US markets. And looking down at the list of activities, you may decide to hire a local person, but what we realized quite fast that the local person over there might not be that familiar with your brand, the qualities of your products, and may not take the right direction when exploring the market and doing all the necessary market studies for you. So what I have to say, what we learned along the journey during that research and since we started selling also back in 2019, that America actually doesn't need your product unless you do not come up with extraordinary innovation, quality, or ideas. It's actually you who needs that big market with population of 330 million. And you have to make sure that your product is well competitive and can gain end consumers' attractions. Second thing, you have to make sure that you will be really innovative with your brand or your product to find your own room on the market, and actually make sure that once you enter the market, you will be able to keep up with that fast pace of innovations of US markets. Then further learning was that opening the door to US market doesn't necessarily mean you are already entering the room. You have to do quite a few steps really to get in. If you ask me today if you should do all the activities yourself, my answer would be, it depends on your courage, resources, funding available, and your long-term concept and plan. You have to be well prepared. And I have to agree with Michael that you have to allocate significant resources to enter the US market, especially in terms of marketing support. Also working with the agents over there, be it brokers or just sales agents or any import subjects. You have to be really careful. We have learned that not everybody who makes big promises actually can deliver, and you can lose big money on that, big amounts of money. Really, we have realized that even people with or agents and brokers with successful track records in the past may not be actually able to deliver results with your brand if you are very specific as well. So you have to be really careful also when selecting your partner over there. What I have to say now with the current situation, we started back in 2019 and we had quite a nice plan ahead, but unfortunately COVID pandemic hit the markets and the plans went down pretty drastically. But we, as a brand, we are considered as an action team. We took advantage of it, really. We have done a lot of homework in planning, contacting the buyers and distributors over there. And now, luckily for us, I have to say that we take action in the right direction. We are performing quite a few online meetings with strategic retailers of nationwide scales in US, and it looks like this year will be very successful for us with gaining new listings. But again, it took another 3 years really to get to this point and learning on our own failures as well. So it takes a lot of courage, and I'll keep fingers crossed for you guys.
Thank you very much for input and sharing your experience with the US market. We also wish you the best of luck. Now, we received another question, Michael, if you would have time, because this would be quite, I believe, useful for anybody participating, really, because the question is that the representative of the company would like to ask on how to get in touch with agents. What could you say to this?
Good question. The answer may be simple, but maybe not. Agents really don't promote themselves a lot publicly. Yes, I promote myself through working together with trade agencies, but it's not like there is an official public listing out there of who is agent and who is not, and what they exactly do and who that they represent, because it's kind of, I wouldn't call it secretive, but it's kind of protective. You don't want other people to come forward and try to steal your brands away from you. So my best recommendation would be go again to all these trade agencies, these professional trade agencies like Specialty Food Association, like Frozen Food Association, like National Confectioners Association. IDDBA is another one, International Dairy, Deli and Bakery, that's another one. So contact these associations. Most likely they will have lists with potential agents. Maybe you have to become a member first of the association before they release that. But that's probably during COVID, when travel is restricted, your best option. Contact your trade consulates, contact Monica. I'm quite sure she has her connections as well in bringing forward some options for you there. So European American Chamber of Commerce is another one where you can go for help. That's my best advice that I can give you for this question.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. And we know that your schedule is quite busy, so I don't know what kind of time frame you still have for our webinar and how many questions are there still, because I know that you managed to answer some of them, for instance, to that alcoholic beverage Medovica recommended regarding the name.
Yeah, I'll have an easy question here from Old Harold about the barcodes. So yes, there is a difference in barcodes between the US and Europe. In Europe, it's a 13-digit code, and in the US, it's a 12-digit code. So you will definitely have to change your packaging in order to make sure that the barcodes are readable for the industry over here. I'll take another one from Baked in Europe. Does a EU producer need to incorporate a US company in order to carry out business in the US? Well, basically, if you are in the baking industry, frozen baking industry, and as I told you, I have lots of experience in that, you are going to need local inventory here in the US. If you have local inventory in the US, regardless whether you work through an agent or how you're going to do it, working through an importer with frozen bakery goods is not going to lead you to much because your product will be too expensive. You won't be able to compete. So most likely you will start up and you will see the need for having local inventory. If you have local inventory, after 1 or 2 years, the IRS, our US tax department, will come back to you and they will tell you, hey, you have an inventory in the US, you are selling on the US market, but you're not paying taxes on your profits. So you are acting as a US company, so now you have to incorporate your US corporation and you have to pay taxes over here as well. So although, in response to the question, maybe not the first 6 months or maybe a little bit more, but rather sooner than later, you will need to set up your US entity in order to be safe for IRS and penalties and whatever they may come out with at that moment. So that's my best advice there.
Okay, are there still some outstanding questions that would be probably useful to all of the participants, or maybe we will follow up in the near future?
Yes. I am inviting everybody who has additional questions to follow up with me after the webinar. Unfortunately, I do have a next call in 5 minutes, so I have to start rounding off here and thank everybody for their time, for their interest, and I wish you all good luck and success doing business here on the US market.
Michael, thank you very much, and rest assured that we will share your contact with all the participants as well as the recording of this webinar.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. A týmto by som sa zároveň rozlúčil so všetkými. Ďakujem za hodinu a pár minút navyše, ktoré ste s nami stavili. Ako bolo spomenuté, podujatie bolo nahrávané, po tom, čo ho uploadíme, tak vám bude poslaný aj link k zjavnutí Discord a s ďalšími otázkami sa môžete obracať či už priamo na mňa, alebo kontakty budú poslané spoločne s tým pohľadom, ktorý bol spomínaný. Tak ja teda prajem ešte pekný zvyšok dňa a dovidenia.
Ďakujem, pekný zvyšok dňa.
Dovidenia a pekný zvyšok dňa.